Mr. Speaker, the government has been forced to admit that it has lost contact with 85% of the 5,000 people earmarked for removal to Rwanda. Has he found them yet?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the honourable gentleman is that in spite of him blocking every single attempt that we have taken, we have managed now, because of our actions, to reduce the number of people coming here by over a third last year, remove over 20,000 people from this country back to their home countries, carried out 70% more illegal enforcement raids, arrested hundreds of people, closed down thousands of bank accounts, and processed over 100,000 cases, the biggest number in over 20 years, Mr. Speaker. That's because on this side of the House, we want to stop the boats, we have a plan, it's working, and with him we would just go back to square one.
Mr. Speaker, spending £400 million on a plan not to get anybody to Rwanda whilst losing 4,000 people is not a plan. It's a farce. Only this government could waste hundreds of millions of pounds on a removals policy that doesn't remove anyone. Only this government could claim that it's going to get flights off the ground only to discover they couldn't find a plane. Only this government could sign a removal deal with Rwanda, only to end up taking people from Rwanda to here. But he still hasn't answered the question. So I'll try again. What progress has he made in locating the 4,250 people his government has apparently lost? He's dodged it 3 times. Where are they?
Mr. Speaker, it's the same thing again and again. Here we are talking about what we are doing, but I'm happy to go over it, Mr. Speaker. What are we doing? We've increased the number of illegal enforcement raids by 70%, leading to thousands of arrests, using powers, Mr. Speaker, that he blocked in this House. We have closed down thousands of bank accounts of illegal workers, again, using powers that he blocked, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Mr. Do you want that early cup of tea, or are you going to be a little bit more silent, Prime Minister?
And, Mr. Speaker, as I said, we have worked through a record number of cases and returned a record number of people back to where they've come. All of that is a plan that is working, and we can see that it's working because the numbers of people coming to this country are down by over a third. But again, it is a bit rich to hear him in here pretending that he cares about how we actually stop the boats when he's been crystal clear. He's been crystal clear and said that even if the plan is working to reduce the numbers, he would still scrap it, Mr. Speaker. It's because he has no values, no conviction and no plan, and it's back to square one.
No.
He hasn't got a clue where they are, has he? I can tell you one place they aren't, and that's Rwanda. Because the only people who sent to Rwanda is cabinet ministers. And for all the word in this Rwanda gimmick, he had to be talked out of scrapping the whole thing. He didn't want to fund it. He didn't think it would work. When he sees his party tearing itself apart, hundreds of bald men scrapping over a single broken comb, doesn't he wish he'd had the courage to stick to his guns?
Well, Mr. Speaker, now, I have absolute conviction that the plan we've put in place will work. Absolute conviction, because I believe it's important that we grip this problem. Now, he spends a lot of his time in this House talking about his time as a lawyer, Mr. Speaker, and I would urge him to listen to them, because Lord Wolfson has said that our bill severely limits the... 4 eminent KCs have said that it is undoubtedly the most robust piece of immigration legislation this Parliament has seen. And Mr. Speaker, a former Supreme Court...
I want to hear what the Prime Minister's got to say, because it matters to my constituents, those who feel it doesn't matter to those. Please leave, Prime Minister.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, 4 eminent cases said this is undoubtedly the most robust legislation passed, and a former Supreme Court justice has been clear that the bill would work. But I know, Mr. Speaker, he's always been more interested in what lefty lawyers have to say, Mr. Speaker. I've even got here the textbook that he authored for them. And it's called, and I quote, European Human Rights Law by Keir Starmer. So,
Prime Minister! Prime Minister, when I stand up, please sit down. Can I just say, we don't use props in this House, and I will certainly ensure that if you do need reminding, I certainly will.
Brutally exposed by his own MPs yet again. He's got one party chair who says she hopes the Lords will rip his Rwanda deal to pieces. He's got 2 more who had to quit because they don't think it'll work. All of them appointed by him, all now in open revolt against his policy, each other, and reality. Is there any wonder they all think this gimmick is doomed to failure when the Prime Minister himself doesn't believe in it?
Mr. Speaker, it is rich to hear from the honourable gentleman about belief in something, because it will be news to him. It is actually the case that you can believe in something and stick to that position on this side of the House.
I will say to this side. Oh, hello. Somebody's jumping in from over. Can I just say it's very important. It's an important day. People want to know what's going on. So I want my constituents, just like yours, to hear what the Prime Minister's got to say. Prime Minister.
Just this week, Mr. Speaker, we had another example of the honourable gentleman doing one thing, saying another, because this week he backed the Home Secretary in banning the terrorist group Hizb ut-Tahrir, despite him personally using the European Court of Human Rights to try and stop them being banned. And don't take my word for it, Mr. Speaker, the extremist's own press release said, and I quote, the Hizb ut-Tahrir legal team led by Keir Starmer. Now, I know he doesn't like talking about them because they've been a client, but when I see a group chanting jihad on our streets, I ban them, he invoices them.
If the Prime Minister can't even persuade his own MPs that it's worth supporting him, if he himself doesn't even believe in his own policies, why on earth should anyone else think differently?
Mr. Speaker, another week when it's crystal clear the honourable gentleman doesn't believe in anything and he doesn't have a plan. Now, while he talks the country down, let me update him on what's actually been happening in the past week. Inflation more than halved from 11% to 4%. Real wages rising. Real wages rising for the 5th month in a row. Last week, rates started falling and millions of people benefited from a tax cut worth £450. So while he takes us back to square one with a £28 billion tax grab, let's stick with a plan that's delivering a brighter future for Britain. Mr. Speaker, if the honourable gentleman did care about supporting working families to pay their bills, to pay their mortgage, why on earth is the SNP making Scotland the highest tax part of the United Kingdom, where the average, Mr. Speaker, not the wealthiest, where the average worker in Scotland is now paying more tax than they do in England?
Worker calls bombing us on full stomachs. Yep. 24,000 people have already been killed. So can he tell us what will it take for him to back a permanent bilateral ceasefire?
Mr. Speaker, of course we want to see a peaceful resolution to this conflict as soon as possible. A sustainable, permanent ceasefire with an end to the destruction, fighting and loss of life, release of hostages and no resumption of hostilities would, of course, be the best way forward. But in order to achieve that, a number of things need to happen. Hamas would have to agree to release all the hostages. Hamas would no longer have to be in charge of Gaza, and the threat of more rocket attacks from Hamas into Israel would have to end. And the Palestinian Authority, boosted with assistance, would need to return to Gaza in order to provide governance and aid. That is the sustainable ceasefire that we will work very hard to bring about.